This is the first of our vocabulary tools, concept circles. So the first part is going to be PowerPoint narrated, and the second part is going to be have multiple examples of me modeling the tool. So first off is that the concept circles is a graphic organizer. And most of the tools we're going to be talking about are different kinds of graphic organizers. And the first one, and graphic organizers create visual references for concepts, vocabulary. As we mentioned, that vocabulary are concepts, so it creates that visual reference. And through the visual representations, the students are able to see and understand how the concepts are related. And as such, or also is that concept circles are highly versatile, and they're easy to differentiate for diverse learners, as you'll see. So there are three general stages or categories of uh, of concept circles. The first one is where all you're doing is naming the overarching category. So in this case, we have a science concept of Galilean satellites, a giant red spot, magnetosphere, and the greatest mass of all planets. And so we would notice that all four of them relate to the planet Jupiter. So in this line, it says one, we would write Jupiter. That's the overarching category. So all of the category, all of these stages are going to highlight that, name the category. And so that'll be part of it. But then what you do with the circles components is going to vary. And so then also part of that is then this generalization. So the students are being asked to generalize. So I want you to note the cognitive task that's being asked of students is to note and pay attention to the similarities, to compare the terms, and then generalize from those terms from the overarching concept. So the second one, is the intermediate, and where we're trying to shade or mark out the section that does not belong. And this example comes from, is an art example, where we have detail, light, pointillism, and definite contours. And I don't know how much you know of art, but three of the four are elements of composition. So, and that would be detail, light, and indefinite contours. Pointillism is a style of art. So, using all those little dots, that's pointillism. So that would be a style of painting, and the others are compositions of art. And so another couple other examples we have also from science and social studies. We have magnetism, density, solubility, and flammability. And the one that doesn't fit, flammability. And then we have some Civil War people, William Lloyd Garrison, Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, and Harriet Tubman. And obviously Jefferson Davis, who's the president of the Confederacy, doesn't belong with the other categories of abolitionists. Now, the third or most advanced and or challenging is where we add a related similar concept. And it's more challenging than finding the opposite because we tend to learn by opposites first, antonyms. When we start learning vocabulary when we're very little, we learn it by opposites oftentimes. In, out, up, down, up, inside, outside, etc. So that's actually easier than coming up with another similar synonym. But that's why this is a more challenging task. We still have to generalize, compare the terms that are similar, that are and then figure out which one would be another like term, and then generalize to come up with the overarching concept. So we have alliance, treaty, pact. And another term that might be similar would be agreement. And so trying to come up with the overarching concept might be terms of agreement, because we can have treaties like the NATO treaty that deals with trade, or we can have treaties that end wars. There are next couple examples are a couple of different kinds of use for concept circles, and this would be elementary grade. So dealing with penguins, and we know that we have the overarching category for all of them. And the first one is I suspect they were using it during a During tool where they're having students find another element to describe what penguins do or an attribute of penguins. So they were given they eat fish, they can swim, they can't fly. And the one that seems to be added is they live in Antarctica and South America. Okay. So they were trying to, when they were trying to find, they had to find another category, another idea that relates to penguins that's not already specified. Then the second one is the figure out which one doesn't belong. They eat fish, they can swim, they live in Antarctica, they can fly long distances. We already know that penguins can't fly, so then it's marked out. Now, I actually have a problem with the third example because this used more like a vocabulary square, just in a circular form. So, because we have a definition, we have a sentence, and an interesting fact and an image. So, if this was in a square, then we have a vocabulary square Frere model. Um, and I have a problem with, as you know, from the other PowerPoints related to student generated sentences. So the third example actually is more of a vocabulary square, but in a circular form. But in some disciplines, particularly like science, social studies, English language arts, or even if in health would be in a powerful point, is where you're combining concept circles as a vocabulary tool with a writing to learn. So in this case, we have this peristalsis, mucus glands, water, and nutrients. Now we have three terms that go together and one that doesn't. And so then the task was to demonstrate what one knows how those fit together by writing a sentence. And the sentence here was peristalsis pushes food and water through the intestines to pull out nutrients. No mention of mucus glands. So it helps demonstrate students' reasoning in relationship to concept circles. Hi, gang. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. Corinne Wickens. I am a specialist in adolescent literacy here in the Department of Curriculum Instruction. So I am going to model this morning a few different examples using concept circles. So these examples will be time-stamped so that you, based on your disciplines, you can find the example that you need. This science example comes from a biology text, chapter 2, chemistry of life, and a few different sections in here. So we have in concept circles 3 different levels: easiest, intermediate, and challenging. In the easiest stage, all we're trying to do is determine what is the overarching concept. So cohesion, adhesion, capillarity, and bonding. So cohesion, adhesion, dealing with elements and the particles, the way they come together. So this section is called simply cohesion and adhesion. And otherwise, we might talk about types of bonding that can happen. So all we're trying to do in the first one is determine the overarching concept. So that's why it's the easiest. All 4 concepts are similar and relate to one overarching concept. And then all we're trying to do is figure out and generalize from these 4 concepts, what is the overarching concept. So then moving on to intermediate, in the same chapter, we have the words concentration, solute, solvent, and adhesion. Now, in the intermediate, we have one word that does not fit. And I often go back to picture pages, way before anybody's time here, but we're trying to figure out which one does not fit. So I look at concentration, solute, solvent, and adhesion. We know adhesion, we just discussed, deals with kinds of bonding. These are dealing with solutions and how things get dissolved. So overarching concept is solutions. And the one that does not belong is the word adhesion. So we're going to mark it out, just like that. And lastly, we have the most challenging, and in this case, we leave one blank. So we have acid, pH, base. So an overarching concept for this one would be acids and bases. And another word that would fit into that same category would be buffer. So then now we have easiest, intermediate, and challenging. So where we're trying to go from only trying to figure out what is the overarching concept, figuring out which one does not fit, and then coming up with leaving at least one blank and coming up with the both overarching concept and something similar. This example comes from a middle school social studies text, American history, Civil War to the present. And I'm taking the vocabulary from chapter 25, the Great Depression and the New Deal. So we talk about the easiest category is the one where we are looking for only for the overarching concept. So we have the ideas of shantytowns, unemployed, Hoover, and Great Depression. So we're trying to come up with an idea that links all four categories, and that would be Hoovervilles. The shanty towns that created because of the increased unemployment during the Great Depression and named after Hoover for the lack of support and recognition that many people blamed on Hoover. So then again, we have all four concepts and only trying to come up with the overarching concept. In the intermediate stage, we are looking for both the overarching concept and the word that does not belong here. So in this case, we have overproduction, increased layoffs, decreased demand for exports, and profit. Now, overproduction, increased layoffs. So we have an overproduction of goods and services. But we have decreased demand for our exports from foreign countries. So as a result, we have increased layoffs, which doesn't connect to profit. So in this case, our overarching concept, three that goes together, causes of the Great Depression. And the one that doesn't fit is profit. All right, and the last, we have the third category is the more challenging, where we have three categories that are similar, and we leave at least one category blank. So in this case, we have Federal Communications Commission, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the Public Works Administration. And all of these are related because they are part of the New Deal programs put into place by FDR. And there are several that could be put in this place. I am going to add one, the Securities and Exchange Commission. So all of these are different programs that FDR put in under the New Deal's program to help get people to work and to help regulate and to avoid such situations in the way. But the point here is that there were more than just 4 New Deal programs. And so then part of the significance is that there is not one single additional right answer. So then students could be able to come up with multiple answers. And in this particular chapter, there's at least 9 different programs that are listed. So then students would be able to highlight one and then be able to research more on that program later on. To quickly recap, then we have 3 different levels of concept circles: easiest, intermediate, and challenging. What is common throughout is that they have to come up with a generalization for the overarching concept, we take the ideas here and then we have to generalize from those to come up with the overarching concept. But then we also have to differentiate and distinguish between what is similar and what is not. And then the most challenging is always to come up with another synonym, another something else that's like. And so that's why the fourth one is blank. This next example comes from a high school sociology text. And so we are taking it examples are coming from chapter 16, collective behavior and social change. Just FYI. All right. So we have three different categories: easiest, intermediate, and challenging. And in easiest, all we're trying to do is find the overarching concept. So we have reactionary, revisionary, conservative, and revolutionary. So we're looking for the overarching concept for all four categories, and these are types of social movements. Okay, so that's why it's easy, because all we're trying to do is figure out how these are like. So then the next one, intermediate, we're looking for both the overarching concept and the word that doesn't fit. So in this case, we have agitation, bureaucratization, legitimation, and revolution. Now, agitation, legitimation, and bureaucratization all go into the steps of life cycle of social movements. Revolution is a kind of social movement, but it is not the life part of the life cycle of social movements. So I wrote down the overarching category, and now I'm going to get rid of the overarching category. Excuse me, the category that doesn't fit here. Now our third category, third level, is more challenging, is where we have one quadrant that is left open. In this one, we have resources, charismatic leadership, and media support. Now, oops, left over from previous example. Sorry, New Deal is not related to these particular categories. So resources, media support, and charismatic leadership. Now, all of these go to are elements of a particular theory related to social movements, and that is the resource mobilization theory. Now, for resource mobilization theory, it highlights that resources are needed. We need strong leadership, and usually it helps if it's charismatic. Media support. There are other different elements that are highlighted in it, and one of it is majorly being able to have the administrative elements. So there needs to be a strong administrative infrastructure so that it can sustain itself. So again, through all of these, we have the overarching concept for all of them, but in this case, all we're trying to do is find the similar categories, the overarching category. Here, we're trying to figure out which one doesn't belong. And then lastly, which one we have to come up with an additional one that based on the overarching idea.